I'm Claudine Wong, joining you from KTVU in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I'm joined now by Dr. Jessica Bergstrom, who is a doctor of clinical psychology, and we're going to talk about sleep. And it's so interesting. Dr. Bergstrom, thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Okay, so let's talk about this because it's interesting. There was a recent study that came out, online, published online by Sleepopolis, and I'll pull it up because I thought it was interesting. They were talking about the best places for sleep. And California, where we are, had, in their list of 50 best, there were a lot of Bay Area spots, Los Altos Hills, Atherton, Woodside, all in the Bay Area. And I was thinking about this because I was talking to people about it, and I put it on my Facebook page, and I said, oh, are you guys all getting more sleep, now that we're sheltering in place and you don't have to commute? And it wasn't a universal, yes, I'm totally rested. In fact, it was kind of split down the middle of people saying, I have the worst sleep ever. I can't sleep through the night. I feel unrested. I hate Zoom calls. And then other people saying, yeah, this has been great. When I look at this study, they talk about a lot of different factors. Shelter in place isn't actually in the list, but they do have, how much money you make, how much you weigh, drinking. When you look at a study like this, as a doctor who helps people with sleep, what are your thoughts?
So, sleep is impacted by a lot of different behavioral, environmental, mental factors. And so I think this article is really spot on in terms of how these factors do impact sleep. And I think this is a especially unique time because of shelter in place, because of the pandemic. We're finding that this really is a mixed bag in terms of how people's sleep quality is being affected. I think it's important right now to address kind of how sleep works and why it's so important. And so going into, what the sleep stages are. So for example, if you go into stage one, this is a 90-minute sleep cycle. A whole sleep cycle is 90 minutes total. And the first stage is categorized by very light sleep. Another way to put this is kind of drowsy wakefulness. And oftentimes people don't realize that they're actually in this stage, that they're asleep. Then stage two is really just about your body temperature and your heart rate decreasing. And then you go into stages 3 and 4, which are really important, especially right now with what's going on for us. So, it's categorized as very deep sleep. And this is where the physical restoration of the body is happening. So your immune system is making repairs, you're healing injuries, that sort of thing. So this is important.
And we know that's important, but when I'm tossing and turning and I can't sleep, am I just never getting out of stage one?
Right.
And I'm just, because I think, I always have trouble with my mind racing, and that's where I've tried, meditation apps or listening to different music, because I think depending on people who also say they can't sleep, it can depend on, they're worried about work, they're worried about paying their bills, they're worried about getting sick.
Yeah, there's a lot of rumination, a lot of anxiety right now, even some depressive symptoms going on. And so you're absolutely right. When people have all of this stuff running through their heads, their body is tense, their body is too tense to actually go into these deeper stages of sleep that are so crucial. And related to that, if you are able to go into these deeper stages of sleep, you enter REM sleep, which is, of course, rapid eye movement. And similarly to stage 3 and 4, this is very important too, because it's kind of the more emotional, mental restoration. So what you're experiencing during the day, whether it's emotions, memory, stress, that's when your brain's really taking that in and processing it and making sense of it.
So we should all have REM goals. Like that's where we will feel when we wake up better.
Right. Exactly.
In terms of, and so when we talk about what's keeping us from sleeping, I mean, I could give you a whole long list. I understand that I'm on, I stare at a screen way more than I ever have, simply because, we're doing things like this a lot more. I think people, kids are in school on computers doing Zoom. People are working online more than ever, but that's on top of all these other kinds of factors that impact how we sleep.
Exactly. So, and one of the biggest factors that we're seeing right now is with mental health. And so mental health is very bi-directional in terms of sleep. So meaning if you're having mental health issues, then that's going to negatively impact sleep. And then if you're having sleep issues, that's going to negatively impact mental health. And so what we're seeing right now is anxiety, stress, depressive symptoms, and both of those things, all three rather, are causing either too much sleep or too little sleep, which is what you were kind of referring to earlier. And it's because of understimulation and boredom during the day, right? So we're locked at home. We don't have a whole lot of stimulation going on like we used to. Anxiety and rumination, a busy mind, lowered mood. And then also we're seeing a lot of low energy and low motivation too. So all of those things are playing a very specific role in disrupting sleep, either too much of it or too little of it.
Yeah, I see on your graph too. I mean, you talk about the physical inactivity too in terms of the risk of obesity. Certainly, the weight of Americans in terms of studies like that, that's one thing. But I think separately in this space, when people can't go to their gyms, they can't go to the places that they normally go to. You're kind of scared to go maybe walk into crowded of places. I feel like in the first couple of weeks of the shelter in place, I was like, okay, here's my plan. I had organized my garage 15 times. I'm like, I'm going to work out. And then like week 5, I was like, I don't want to do anything. I was grumpy. I was like, I don't want to go for a run. I don't want to do, and then it took me a little bit to get back into it. And even now it's like it's more of an up and down, even though I know that I feel better when I do it, I still sometimes just don't do it.
Yeah, I think that this pandemic is impacting people's psyches more than we realize, and specifically in terms of lack of energy and lack of motivation. Even though we're not doing a whole lot, this is still very exhausting for us. And so when we're mentally and emotionally exhausted with low energy, we're not going to have that physical energy either to go and do these things that we know that are best for us in terms of being creative with trying to be active. And so unfortunately, this is kind of a vicious cycle where, essentially because of the sedentary lifestyle, people are anxious, we're stressed because of the pandemic. So cortisol and adrenaline, which are the stress hormones, because we're anxious and more stressed, those hormones are running more so in our bloodstream right now, thus making it difficult for people to fall asleep and go into those deeper stages of sleep. So that causes poor sleep, and then that causes lowered energy the next day. And so it's the vicious cycle kind of continues over and over.
And then I see the last thing when you're talking about alcohol, I've seen a lot of happy hour Zooms, and certainly I think, I mean, you're not saying that people shouldn't drink at all, but certainly I think if it's like anything, if it leaves that moderation category, then we're probably we think it's making us feel better by drinking a little bit too much, but it is because we're not driving anywhere. We don't have to, go anywhere. But I think you're saying it also has some downside effects that you might not realize.
Yeah, this is a big factor for impacting sleep as well, because while it may feel like after a few drinks, your happy hour, it may feel like you're falling asleep a lot faster. But alcohol is actually, it's a sedative, and being sedated in bed is very different from being and so what happens is a couple things. Number one, when the alcohol is metabolized out of your system, your central nervous system kind of wakes you up, and you're more amped up than you were before. And that's called the alcohol rebound effect. And so you're waking up at 2 a.m. and saying, oh my gosh, I'm wide awake. That's the alcohol leaving your system, the rebound effect. And then the other thing too is when you're sedated, right, from the alcohol, that's preventing you from going into those deeper stages of sleep, REM, which again are very crucial in terms of our physical restoration, healing our bodies, strengthening our immune system, and then being able to process emotions and mental and memories effectively.
Yeah, and so all of that, and then you wake up feeling terrible again, and then wondering why you feel so terrible, and then it all just goes back to that cycle that you were talking about. So then I guess this is the most important page in terms of when someone says, okay, I've had it. I've had it with not sleeping. I've had it with kind of, I have these little, feeling sorry for myself and being mad at the world and all of the things that it's taking away from all of us, and all the people who are sick and being frustrated that, we can't make them better faster. So what are we supposed to be doing? And I think it's like anything, right? If we just really do this, even though we don't want to, we should see some results.
Yeah, and I think a couple factors here are, number one, meet yourself where you're at. We are all doing the best we can, and to have some self-compassion during this difficult times. We're not at 100%. So find things that are creative that work for you right now. So coming up with a consistent wake up time. So I'm seeing a lot of people, because they can, they're waking up later and later, staying in bed later and later. So even though you don't have anything scheduled per se, still have a consistent wake up schedule time, really trying to find control in your life, to be able to find normalcy through a routine during the day. So from 10 to 12, that's when I know I'm going to do something physically active, right? So having some daily structure that way. Another thing that I think is important right now is giving yourself just some space during the day to have process time, whether it's reflecting inward or
Mhm.
journaling. So much of what we're doing right now is we're paying attention and using so much energy towards the external factors in our life rather than actually paying attention to what's going on internally with our thoughts and our emotions. And then when you go to bed at night, that's when all of those thoughts and emotions kind of flood you, making it difficult to fall asleep. So I
Yeah.
literally prescribe worry time during the day where you just kind of sit and reflect, what's going on? Let me process some of this.
Yeah.
Um,
And then you can let it go. You can either tear up the piece of paper and say, okay, now that I've released it, or theoretically release it in that balloon out into the world. I think, separately, I think this is what I hear from people who retire too. When they retire, they think, okay, I have all this great time. Now I don't have to go to work, but they actually are happier in retirement when they have a structure in their day as well, because we, as I think human beings, kind of thrive off that more than we think.
right, right. And again, it's that finding that normalcy during the day. Exactly.
Okay. And then, so we just slow down mind
Yeah.
and body.
Yeah, so being able to slow down the mind and body, especially at night, so that our minds know, okay, so now we're preparing to fall asleep. So, that could be things like meditation or some stretching or some yoga, some, deep breathing. That's just kind of a nice way to slow down and prepare being able to fall asleep.
I think,
Um,
we did that with babies too, right? They give them a bath at a certain time every night, and then it kind of is a trigger to your brain to just say, this is, oh, we're getting there. We're starting the wind down. We're turning off things. And I think we forget to do that for ourselves as adults, even though we know it's worked, for children and other people. I think this is an interesting, your other 2 points in this of mindfulness and social support. It's also to recognize, the hardest, I think I was telling someone the other day, you pretend everything's fine, everything's fine. You're trying to look at the positive, look at the positive, look at the positive. But there is this, kind of veil of loss that we're all feeling, loss of feeling secure, loss of feeling safe, loss of being able to go out, loss of freedoms. Like, and you can't really ignore it. If you ignore it, it doesn't make it not go away. I think you just kind of have a big break every now and again because you've ignored it for so long.
exactly. And so having a more mindfulness approach of just observing, giving yourself that space to hold the reality of this is a difficult time and I'm feeling
Yeah.
these emotions right now, and balancing it with the positive too, rather than grasping onto a negative thought or emotion and trying to fix it or make it bad somehow or better somehow, or avoiding it altogether. So mindfulness can be really helpful right now as well.
Yeah, and getting out. We know the golf courses are open again. We're hoping that that science allows us to open things even more. And while we're doing that, and as we get into that, I think we'll have more options to get moving. Although now you can still walk around the block 10 times if you need to. You don't
Yep.
have to go. You don't have to do a hard fast run, right? You could just get moving.
Right. A little goes a long way. Exactly.
And so, and you mentioned the deep breathing, the meditation, the stretching, and the yoga. If people haven't done that before, it's not something, they didn't go to yoga class before. That's something that is maybe maybe now's a good time to try it.
Sure. Right. So, again, meet yourself where you're at, do what works for you, be a little bit more creative, and the bottom line here, why this is so important is, going back to feeling stressed, feeling anxious, and having increased levels of cortisol and adrenaline going in our systems. We're physical beings, and anxiety and stress is such a physiological state of being. We
Hmm.
often need just a little bit of a physical outlet to release some of that cortisol and adrenaline. So even if it is just stretching, you don't have to, be a yoga master or get into it right now. Right? Just work with what you have and what you're able to do.
Yeah, and I think there are so many now, also groups that weren't out there before that allow us to do that. You mentioned the alcohol as well. You can have some, but you don't, right? You just don't want to have too much. It isn't going to make it all better if that's what you're you're hoping for. It should be recreational instead of medicinal, I guess is the
Right. Yeah.
is the point. Yeah, and I think that that will help. Let's talk about some the other way we're dealing with this, and I think it's our brains. And you say that you have people will say they have these these crazy dreams. National Geographic just did an article on that specifically, and I think it's because you know I know sometimes I wake up and sometimes I don't remember, but sometimes I do get up these days and I'm like, I don't know what that was about, and National Geographic did this article saying the pandemic is giving people vivid, unusual dreams, and here's why. I'll just ask you, why? Is that just us working it out?
Yeah, so that's such an interesting article. And so what they're referring to is a couple things happening right now. So again, REM sleep is when we have the majority of our dreams. And a lot of us don't actually remember our dreams when it happens. If we do, it's usually because we're waking up either in the middle of it or right after. And so what they're talking about is that people are dreaming more in negative nature, and also people are dreaming with more in a vivid nature. So um, what I tell people is dreams can be either very literal in their manifestation of what we're processing emotionally and remembering, or they can be more symbolic in theme. So so like I said, it's a manifestation of what we've learned from the day, what we've felt, how we're feeling emotionally, what we're thinking, our memories. And so people are finding that their dreams are a lot more vivid right now, because what we're seeing is, due to the shelter in place, we're kind of understimulated right now. And so our
Hmm.
brains are sort of digging deeper, trying to find more content to process more than what we're giving our brains during the
Is
day.
is that a good thing? I mean, are these dreams a good thing because we're working them out, or are there anything we should be concerned about? Because there are some that if you do remember them, you're like, I guess that's okay. I guess I'm working it out.
REM sleep, and specifically dreams and nightmares, they're there for a purpose. They're helping us figure out and put together what we're going through. And sometimes that's one of the safest ways to go through these emotions and memories. And this is a really stressful time. It's a negative time for people, and our dreams are telling us that. So I tell people, don't be concerned, don't be worried about our dreams. Just listen to them, just be aware. Um,
So there's something that your brain is trying to work through. When do you think we'll get better sleep? I mean, do you think that it's achievable during this crazy time, especially if we're talking, it might not be any semblance of what we used to know for until a vaccine comes out, whenever that is, and when even once the vaccine comes out, then we all have availability to get that vaccine, and if it continues to work and all the things that we were worried about. I mean, is that sleep that we dream of having for those people who are not having better sleep achievable in so much uncertainty, or is there some loss that's just going to happen that's normal?
that's such a hard question to answer. I think a lot of this is going to really depend on individuals kind of going internal, right? So we don't have this sense of knowing, this predictability, even this sense of control in our external environments right now, because of we just don't know. So I think it really is going to rely on us being able to have just good self-care, really addressing these different factors of our mental health, keeping alcohol in moderation, doing our best to stay active. Like I said, just a lot of self-care to be able to help with sleep and get that improvement that we need right now. So I
Yeah,
think with time it will improve.
in some ways too, just accepting that we're doing the best we can, but if you need help, make sure to reach out for help, because I think a lack of sleep, as you talked about, that cycle can put you down to a dark place.
Hmm.
And depending on the stresses that continue to grow with the economy, or you know health and family, and just the world around us, and the loss of so many things that we thought we were going to have at this time that we're not having. um, Help is out there, I
Yeah,
think,
and to
is
know that we're
also.
not the only ones, right? We're all in this together, and we don't have to, nor should you, have to hold all of this inside. So use your support. There's a lot of teletherapy going on, support groups online too.
Yeah, it's important. All right, Dr. Jessica Bergstrom, here's to hoping that we all get a better night's sleep sooner than later. All right,
Yeah.
thanks so much for the insight. Always great to talk to you.
Thank you, and likewise.
And for more interviews, of course, you can go to coronavirusnow.com. Thanks so much for joining us.